Cotton?
Bob Moses, Charlie Cobb was here. I think Charlie was here. Leon Diamond, and I think Marion was here for a period
He
of
was.
time, Marion Barry. So these people just actually just taught us classes. You know, we had classes at the Masonic Temple and at St. Paul Methodist Church until we got in Campbell College.
Dr. Brock, I understand the nature of the times, you know, that you lived in, you know, during that period. But I'm interested in, what were your personal views about race segregation? I mean, did you think it was something that was good, or did you see need for change, or?
No, I knew it was wrong, but also I knew that, whether that Red Hefner, he used, in my image, he used poor judgment. This was a white man that he brought to his house on a social event. It wasn't about race, he was trying to be nice. But it just, he should have met him somewhere else. He shouldn't have brought it to his home, you know, anything like that. Let me give you an example. When I was in the Army, I was stationed at Augusta, Georgia, at Fort County, right outside. And anyway, Camp Gordon. And we had an orthopedic surgeon, a young black man with his wife and 2 children, came in to the hospital. And no place on the base, it was all full. So he had to go in. It was some 20-minute drive into Augusta, Georgia to find a place to live. He couldn't find any place because Augusta was completely segregated. He had to go to what was acceptable for black people to do. And he wouldn't put his dog out there, much less bring his wife and his children out there. And I had a wife and 1 child, and I had no problem whatsoever finding a place to live. I couldn't say anything. I felt sorry for him. Nothing could I do. It wouldn't do any good. You couldn't buck what was going on.
So you knew there were certain lines that you couldn't cross either?
You on base, there was no problem because it was completely desegregated.
Right.
I mean, you didn't get out of line at all. But when you got out in the civil community in Augusta, Georgia, that's deep south.
You ever seen any personal, having any personal accounts of anything involving the Klan in Macomb?
No. No, I managed to kind of keep, I was trying to keep my wife and my daughters away from it, you see, for that part.
Dr. Rock, you started talking about the 4-way test, but I'm not sure you finished. Could you tell the story about what you did with the 4-way test at that time?
All right, from Rotary International, I got a little disc plaque. That you put on, had it written down on there. I ordered enough for every member of the Rotary Club to have one, and I sent one to the ministers of the major churches in town. I sent it to the Board of Supervisors of Pike County, the City Board of Macomb and Summit and Osaka, and I sent it to Chief of Police, the Sheriff, and major churches, asking them to practice what the 4-way test said and display it prominently where they work. That part of it, and try to live by it. And now, the Rotary Club in Macomb we got national recognition by Rotary International for having done so. So we got a little publicity from that concern. But that in conjunction with, it let people know that we were outspoken that we wanted to abide by that. This was our town, and we believed that every person had the same rights as the next person.
So this was in 1964?
1964.
Did you see, after y'all did that, did you begin to see the shift?
Well, that's when that's when the bombings occurred, and that's when the newspaper advertisement came out, and also and the person that's doing the bombing were found, and the judge put that order on. He said, and so whoever those 3 boys had, their group, the word spread around because there was not a single bombing after that. There'd been 16 there in just a very short period of time all over the county. And not a single bombing occurred after the judge did that. And those guys, they didn't go to prison because they were out on parole. But it did some good, and that was the change that took place, and things began to heal.
Now, as a physician during that time, were you allowed to treat African Americans?
Yeah. I
And
did.
did the medical care treatment that they received was it different from?
No, it's the same. I often spoke to people who work, and and I did general surgery a lot of times. When you open an incision in the abdomen, for instance, they're going to take the appendix out. Well, what you have, and you bring sterile material up in there and clamp around in this, and unless you looked over the screen and looked at that person's face, you don't know whether they were white or black, green or yellow, because you didn't see anything. Everybody is exactly the same on the inside once you open it up.
But my concern was, the question was because there was, as she was saying, there was a waiting area for the blacks and colored, whatever they call them, and infirmary for the whites. That's why I was wondering if there was a difference between the medical care.
They got exactly the same. They got exactly the same treatment. Now, of course, they were segregated. And now, when we desegregated the hospital, then I'll tell you briefly. One of the most embarrassing, I guess, in a way. I had a prominent white man. I went to his house at 3 o'clock in the morning. He had a real severe stroke, and he was what we call desegregated. And in fact, that stroke, just like you had taken a knife and cut his spinal cord in half and separated the brain from the rest of the body. Well, that was the condition I found him in at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I told his wife, he's not going to live, but we're going to take him to the hospital and keep him comfortable. Now, when I got to the hospital, the hospital ended in a few months, we had desegregated. What used to be the colored male ward, there was one bed vacant in that ward, and that was the only vacant bed in the entire hospital. There wasn't but one, and it happened to be in that 4-bed ward that used to be for colored men. Well, I had to put that man in that bed. That's where he was. He was white. And we were right next to him. And Macomb Infirmary is where McDonald is now, the big Baptist church down in the corner. Well, I knew the Baptist women were going to start coming visiting. As soon as daylight came, they were going to show up. And I was going to be faced those old women. Why did you put that man up in there like that? I knew that I was going to get it. So, but he got, incidentally, he died about 1 o'clock that same morning. And, that was, and certainly I wouldn't have put him in there, but that was absolutely the only bed in the hospital to put that man in.
I have one more question. How would you view your colleagues' medical treatment? They may not have the same, more values or ethics as you had for all race. How did they respond to African American treatment versus the way you handled your medical?
I don't think, I had some of the best friends in the black community with the other. They were loyal, they were appreciative. They come up to me this day and thank me. We had a girl work for the enterprise. She overheard me talk about something. It turned out that back when the hospitals were segregated, my dad had went up into Berkeley and made a house call in the middle of the night. The woman had a tubal pregnancy. She had a pregnancy that occurred out in the tube. And he discovered it, brought her to the hospital, operated on her, and removed it and saved her life. And of course, that was before this woman was born. If he hadn't done that, and the patient got well and had 4 children, one of them happened to be this woman who worked in the Enterprise Journal. She wouldn't have been there if my dad hadn't gone upstairs and brought that woman back to Macomb Infirmary and operated on her in the middle of the night. And it didn't make any difference. She got exactly the same care that anybody else did. I think they were just appreciative. And we all always treat anybody with respect. God's true. But generations are different. My dad had different ideas about it. I tried to desegregate the dining room and the infirmary, he wouldn't let me. And he said, and he was the kind of guy you didn't go ask him twice.
Questions?
Back to that, like you took the full page ad out and prominent citizens signed it. Was there any backlash from that personally that you
No,
experienced?
the only backlash was favorable. I think everybody appreciated it, and it for the first time, those people, you could go read the names, and you saw the names of the people that were making a public statement that we believe in equal rights for everybody. And we wanted this business of it was civil unrest is where they were breaking the law, doing things like that. And we wanted it to stop, and it did.
What he's talking about is called the Statement of Principles.
Yeah.
And there was 650 people that signed it. It's still on the website, it's included through Tom Legacy's.
Well, and my question was, Jackie, did the black community feel like the black community felt about that statement of principles? Do you, whenever you think of the statement of principles, is your feeling the same as Dr. Brock, as that it was the turning point?
Historically, it was a turning point that it happened, but no, because the black community wasn't trusting anything that went on in that.
Black, there were not any blacks who signed it, just come out.
No, it wasn't.
Well,
Wasn't offered.
yeah, I was gonna say, were black people even offered an opportunity to sign?
I know that it was offered.
So it really was like a peace offering from the black community to the black community.
Did you do that? Peace offering?
Oh, well, yes, it should have been. It should have been a statement saying that we're tired, we want. But you couldn't just break the line and do it. Because I made it while we were trying to get the hospital going. I made a per judgment. I got on a talk radio show, call in. Somebody called in, they said, I wouldn't believe Dr. Ralph Brock on a stack of Bibles. Well, my two girls, my wife, and so forth, I knew we won't hear that. The bad thing is I recognized the man's voice. And I knew who called. I withdrew from the act of participating in the hospital thing for about 3 years. Because I said, it's not worth it to me for my family to have to suffer that kind of an injustice.
Now, why was that person calling you?
They called a radio station.
But why was it? What was his grief or his anger about you? Why was he angry at you?
Well, I made a statement that we needed to have the new hospital, that our other hospitals were behind time, and we needed to get the most modern in town to attract better doctors into town and so on like that. And then people, the public could call the radio station and ask us questions. Well, this one just called in and made a statement. See, I was identified with 2 or 3 of us on the radio program that morning. We was out and answered questions.
Now, was there anything about race in that call? Or was it just this person didn't like you personally?
No, they didn't like the idea of a desegregated hospital.
Oh, so it was about segregation. Oh, I see. So that was the controversy. I understand. So I want to ask you a little question about this, because this is, I think, I'm going to make a statement as well as a question. I apologize, but one of the issues for these teachers is how do you teach in this period? And it's one thing when I talk to teachers from Connecticut about teaching this, they can say whatever they want about Macomb, Mississippi, right? But when you're teaching in Macomb, Mississippi, and you say, all right, I'm going to have all of my students go back and ask their parents or grandparents what they were doing, you might be a little nervous about what might come back. And I think one of the big issues that's gonna be really hard to teach, students wanna make things simple, particularly if it's a right and wrong question. And it's gonna be very easy for the students. They're just gonna think all the white people in Macomb were these just terrible people. And so I guess my curiosity to the teachers and also to you is, I don't mean to defend anybody who did anything in Macomb in 1964, but I'm always suspicious when we as historians look back on the past and feel morally superior to it. We always say, oh, I would have been one of the good guys, I would have been an abolitionist, I would have been, I would have shot Hitler, I would have whatever. So I'm really curious to, how do we communicate to students what it was like to live in that time? So you, for example, just said something the thing that really struck me was you said you recognized that segregation was wrong, but you also were, you think that Mr. Hefner, in having a civil rights worker to his home, had used bad judgment. And so I wonder if I can ask you to reflect more on that, to give us a sense of why that
Not meeting with the man, because he was just trying to be nice to him. He had connection with his family or something. It wasn't a racial meeting. He wasn't in there to try to discuss. He was just trying to be nice to him, have him come have a meal with his house. But I think he didn't realize how much animosity they read. He should have met with him at a neutral place, not bring him in. His home is okay, but that home was in a neighborhood, you see, that was all white. And the so-called white community objected. Now, when my younger daughter was a student, and this was up in 1970, she was a cheerleader. There were five white girl cheerleaders, and there were five black girl cheerleaders. Now, I was the unofficial chauffeur. I took the white girls to every out-of-town basketball game we went to. The black girls got there, I don't know how they got there, but they needed to get there. When they were at the field, the 10 of them worked together just fine. But there was no social intermixing.
Segregated within the desegregated society.
Now, that year too, they bought jackets for the girl cheerleaders. They bought 10 of them. My wife had them stored at our house because she was on mission to. But one Friday night, it was as cold as it could be, and now they weren't to get the jacket until the parents paid for it. They had to pay for the jacket. Well, the 5 white jackets had been paid for. Now, the single one of the black jackets had been paid for. So all 10 of them was at my house. Well, my wife said, the heck with it, pay it or anything else, those girls are cold. So she took all 10 jackets out to the field and gave every girl a jacket. And we never, to my knowledge, I don't think the other jackets were paid for. But anyway, everybody got a jacket that night because it was too cold. But now, we didn't invite those, after the game, we didn't invite those girls to our house or a party or anything. It just wasn't done.
More questions, please?
Ms. Martin, you said you was living in a close-knit community. When did you all start branching out into the overall community? After segregation or what?
Trying to see if I understand your question. You mean,
You
when
said
did we
you
start
was living-
interacting?
Yes, when did
Okay.
you most start interacting?
Oh, we interacted with the other black communities, okay? Now, schools desegregated here, what year, Larry?
1977.
Now, back then, when Dr. Burns talked back in the 70s, well, when the schools started desegregating, then of course, kids start going to the other school or whatever, the schools start mingling. Then when I had interaction with the white community most is when I moved back here and started working, and then of course I had, I interacted with the white community. And then when my son was Larry's classmate, so when they were in school, even after the schools were integrated, the school didn't have a prom back during that time, after they integrated. The school stopped having a prom, so the black kids was at the white school, but the school just didn't have a prom because they didn't think the kids could even interact with each other. And that was everywhere. So then the club that I belonged to, we used to sponsor a prom for the black kids every year. And we did that until the school started having, this prom that the school did. And then of course, the white community sponsored a prom because they were having proms and parties for their kids anyway. And so our kids were having nothing, so then we sponsored that for them.
Miss Jackie, believe it or not, when I graduated from high school in '85, we had separate proms.
Yeah.
We had separate queens, everything. And to this day, even at the school now, the white kids will sit on one side, the black kids will sit. We still have it. And even when it's time for prom, you have some of the white kids that will interact with the black kids, but you have a certain group of white parents, they'll give a party that night, like a crawfish boil or something. And that'll stop those kids from coming to the prom, but what it does is the parents that's doing it, it's not our children now. But you're still seeing it.
We need a copy generation. Your children's children will have a different attitude, and the old folks won't be around to keep you from doing it.
I agree with that some of the older people, when they're gone, that it'll be a different view. But when parents are teaching hate in their house, then that can't change. Does it make sense? Because they're perpetuating the same thing. And I've met some white kids that have actually told me that this is what they're being taught at home. So they're not comfortable interacting with black people when they leave their homes because of the conversations that take place there. But some of that same thing go into some black homes as well. You know what I mean? So it's not just, one side or the other, it's both. So when you have that going on, even generations down the road, I can see some things changing, but I can also see a lot of things that's going to stay exactly the same.
Children generally going to migrate to where they're comfortable. They segregate themselves with groups in which they're comfortable. But now you still have, for instance, they were talking the other day, at Ole Miss, they still have a black caucus up there. They don't have a white caucus. They have a black caucus. Now, if you try to establish a white caucus, there'd be an uproar. Because, again, is it right or is it wrong? I don't know, but that's a fact. That's the way it is.
That's what these kids talk about in class. When you try to teach, when I try to teach civil rights, they immediately make it relevant to them. And they want to know, what is the big deal? Because we segregate ourselves on our own. In the cafeteria, the blacks, not every single person now, I'm just saying overall, blacks sit together, whites sit together. At the football games, the blacks sit together, the whites sit together. They don't have to, and they are friends, and they interact in class, but they choose to separate themselves. So that's where they are when you're teaching them. We choose this,
But blacks and whites will say, that's how we like it. And,
Well, the ultimate theory is for the races to mix in marriage. And also, but it's the children of those marriages that are apt to be ostracized when they come home. That's a shame to lay that on any child. Now, I tell you, that child didn't have a thing in the world to do with mama and daddy, get married or anything else. But if it has to be mistreated or embarrassed or anything else as a result of what their parents did, then I don't think that. But what can you do?
Although, one of the things that's very interesting about this is that we have a president of the United States who's exactly of such descent. One of the things I've said to these teachers before, and again, forgive me, this is more of a statement than a question, but it'll get back to a question. is, F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the measure of a first-class mind is the ability to hold contradictory opinions simultaneously and still function. And I think that's certainly the mark of a first-class historical mind. And so when I teach this to students of mine, part of what I'm trying to tell them simultaneously is that, if you want to think about this, you have to realize the extent to which nothing's changed, or how little has changed, and how much we still are as we were. And you at the same time have to believe how utterly revolutionary these changes are. I mean, a generation ago, it was against the law in the majority of America, 2 generations ago, against the law in the majority of American states to have the kind of union that created the person who is now president. It would have, if we walked to downtown Macomb and go into the McDonald's, it's quite clear that we will see at some point in the day a black person and a white person together as a couple, which in a previous generation would have not only been against the law, but it could have gotten somebody killed. So I'm struck. I mean, the drift of the questions here has been to how little has changed, how much we're still like that. But I also think we need to keep in mind the world that I was describing today, the world where, people were driven out of the community for having a civil rights worker for dinner in their home, or churches were bombed. That's not the world we live in. So somehow, I think that's the trick in teaching this, is to the changes you guys have seen in your life. You live in a country that would have been unimaginable to most people living in the home at the beginning of the 1960s.
My best friend in the Army was a Jewish fellow from Brooklyn Jew. He was black. And he says that you think you've got it bad in Mississippi with the blacks. You ought to come to Brooklyn and see how the Jews are ostracized. And now, for instance, he became he was an Army officer in the Medical Corps. He was stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Because he was an officer, he was able to go to the country club outside of Fort, and we went out there for dinner. He said, in New York, I couldn't take you to this country club because I'm Jewish. He said the Jews in some areas are more ostracized, but it's done in a sneaky way. It's not done openly. It comes and then they hit them blindsided sometimes. But it taught me that it's not just black and white. Human nature.
I just want to comment to what you had said, Mr. Jim, about now in our time now, we most likely will see interracial couple. But back at that time, during the, let's say 40s to 60s, those things were happening, but it was hidden. Because master always slept with the African American girl, or colored girl, whatever you want to call her. And it's just like, to the time that we are now, prejudice still exists, but it's hidden. Just like they hated sleeping with the colored person. Prejudice now is kind of hidden. And sometimes, like she was saying, we can self-consciously divide ourselves.
It's funny, my class, we're discussing the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. And we talk about the hypocrisy of it. Him having written that all men created equal with certain unalienable rights. And not just with him owning slaves, but fathered children by a woman that he actually owned. And my views, you can make all the legislation you want in the world to address,
Don't
segregation.
do as I do, but do as I tell you to.
But until you change the hearts of people, you'll never change. It'll never change. There'll always be these same issues we're talking about now. Because, we're talking about people. You can make all the legislation and pass all the laws.
I still say
People's hearts change.
education is your answer. We've got to educate everybody to bring the family unit back. We've got to bring a family unit. Now, if you have a child that's raised in a good home where the mama and daddy get along and everybody works and does things like that, that child has got a better chance when they're raised by who? Where do they go home to at night?
We had a solid family structure back there in the fifties and sixties, on both sides. But until the playing field is level, I mean,
We've been talking about like civil rights movement, we're teaching civil rights movement in the class, women and state movement, civil rights movement actually began when first slave ship actually landed in America. I think civil rights movement began when Christopher Columbus landed. Because it's not a black and white issue, which is what a lot of people have to realize. Civil rights is not the rights of black people and white people. Civil rights are rights that are violated because I'm not treating you as a human because of certain things, be it race, creed, sexual orientation, handicap, or whatever. It's not about black and white. You have to realize that. You can't just teach black and white because women were, the civil rights of women was violated. No, they couldn't vote just because they're sick. That was a civil rights violation. You have to realize it's more than just a black and white issue when you teach in the science classroom. If you limit it to that, you're going to have controversy. But if you teach the whole scope of the civil rights movement, the whole scope of the history of this country, you're going to see the Indians' rights were violated, the Mexican or Chicano people's rights were violated, the Japanese people, all types of people's civil rights were violated. But for some strange reason, whenever you say civil rights movement in this country, civil rights, the first thing they think of is a black and white issue. And it's not just black and white.
I have a student
It's right. It's
asked me that
right.
question.
But
She
it's-
said, do you mean it's not just black and white? And I
But
said, no.
but see, y'all, whenever you
The
teach
American Indian was more
you have to-
mistreated than anybody.
But yeah, because all this was theirs, and none of it's theirs now. But you have to look at the whole scope of it all, and you can't just say black and white. And that's where y'all limiting yourselves inside your classroom to this little small hole. And whenever you start doing that, folks are gonna start acting crazy, and parents are gonna start complaining.
I got a question, Ms. Martin. When y'all walk out of the school, what did the teachers and administrators do? Did they join you, or did they?
No, they didn't walk out. The teachers did. But there were some teachers there that were very supportive of what we were doing. But they didn't walk out. And it was the principal that said that, what he wanted us to sign a statement before we were readmitted to the school.
When you walked out, what happened when you got home? What did your parents, what was their reaction?
My mom, as a matter of fact,
Wait, hold on, before I had to interrupt. Now, mind you, you say you gotta walk past all these other parents' houses, and that y'all were together as a community.
right.
So was everybody kind of outside when that, waiting on all of y'all to come home?
No, when we were arrested, then that community came to get the kids. You know what I mean? And then because we were downtown, and, in City Hall, because the jail was there in that building. And when my mom came, then it wasn't just my mom that came, it was a lot of kids from my community that was in jail with me. Then this whole community came down to get their kids. And then the kids that were from the other black areas, like Algiers and so forth, from those different communities, then those kind of communities kind of poured out the same way to get their kids.
So, just a quick clarification, so the kids who were under 18 were released into the custody of their parents
That
and not
night,
charged?
right.
Okay.
The ones that was over.
Can I ask another question? This is actually much disputed in the historical literature. How spontaneous was this movement? Because the normal story is that the students decided to do this. But I also know that there were some civil rights workers who were there observing this, so they must have thought this was going to happen. And what's your answer to that?
I think it was both. That it was sort of spontaneous on the students' part, but I think the civil rights workers that were in town, that they were kind of, set kind of the pump a little bit.
Was it a single act or something that happened like this straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, it was because Brenda Travis was not allowed back in school after she had participated in a city
I have a
hall.
question. She wasn't allowed back in school because she participated in the sit-in. Didn't the sit-in take place over summer?
It did.
And she was expelled from school because of something that she did when school wasn't even in and had nothing at all to do with school.
Right. It took place over the summer, and then Brenda was sent to, right. And so she didn't come back, school started like the beginning of September, and then she didn't come back from there until October, when she was, trying to get into school.
And they wouldn't read that.
Right.
So she was sent to the reformatory?
It's an open term?
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I've got a question, I guess any of the three of you chime in on it. I was surprised when Dr. Campbell brought up that the Klan was not necessarily a major force in Mississippi prior to 1960. I did not realize that. I thought there had been sort of a steady stream of it from, General Forrest on up. So that may have been my ignorance. But my question is, and I guess having been born in the 70s, and a lot of my understanding of this situation being informed by the media, I've always sort of in the back of my mind had the idea that at any time prior to the 70s, no black family could feel safe in their own home or going to work or going to church or going to school, no matter what the circumstances, and no matter how much they compromise with the existing system. So is that just an idea that we've gotten through the media or from just overemphasis on certain things that happen? I mean, and because I was shocked when I heard you talk about your community, because it sounded to me like you were actually able to, not that we agree with the power structure, but that within that power structure, it seemed like you were living a relatively safe existence. So what I'm asking is, how violent were the times prior to the 60s and during it? I guess what I'm saying is, were you able to lead a normal life? Because I think the media gives us an idea that just your homes could be invaded at any time, or you couldn't walk down the street without some crazy fool harassing you.
But it was an all-black.
Stayed in your place.
Yeah, it was an all-black marriage.
Almost stayed in your place, you would say.
Right.
So the white people didn't necessarily intrude on your community.
Once in a while.
We knew better. It's like I told you, my dad went up into the Bergman community and made a house call in the middle of the night, which was most unusual. Because it wasn't usually what they wanted to do. They wanted that person to come into the hospital and be seen there, not the doctor go out in there. But he made somewhat of a risky move by going out there in the middle of the night. But now he's the type of fellow, he didn't care. He was going to do it anyway.
A couple of things just very quickly on this. On the history of the Klan, you're right, the Klan is established immediately after the Civil War. That's named in Dec3rd. That Klan is suppressed by the federal government. There's an enormous, in fact, it's a huge debate in the Reconstruction era about alleged expansion of the federal government. They shut it down. And they develop a whole series of civil rights legislation that allows them to prosecute people. And the Klan basically disappears by the early 1870s. That doesn't mean there's not all kinds of other violence, but that organization that Forrest created more or less is suppressed. A second Klan gets reborn in the 19-teens, partly inspired by the movie Birth of a Nation, which had told the story of Reconstruction with the Klans as heroes, partly in the context of a lot of agitation over Jews and immigrants, Catholics. And the Klan one of its first places that's really big is Indiana. So there's a second Klan, and that's the Klan that we still more or less have today. But most Klans were organized on a state basis. In Mississippi, the Klan was moribund through the late 50s. It starts to get traction again in that 60, 61, 62. And by, I think it's 63, it's powerful. They do a thing where they have cross burnings. They decide they're going to have a cross burning in every county the same night. And they don't quite pull it off, but they get 65 counties in one night. So it explodes. And, but it hadn't been released before.
Since you made the statement about cross-burning seven, do you think it was coincidental that maybe it was killed and family members on the same night?
That's just, yeah.
Do you really think
Yeah,
that was?
That was far, those were far distant events. It's a kind of, gives you a sense of how fraught that time was.
So I'm saying he was from the Delta. The guy that killed Mayor Evans was from the Delta region that family member was arrested in. So coincidence, it's just.
That part was not work, I think it's just been happening the same. But I want to touch on this question again, because I think this is a really interesting question, is how do you get your mind around a situation where on the one hand, a black person could be taken off the board in the Jim Crow South if people decided they didn't like you, or you failed to get off the sidewalk when someone was approaching, or just people saw you on the side of the road and were liquored up, or whatever it might be. Black people could be and were simply taken off the board, and there were no consequences to the people who did it. I mean, the story I just told, a state legislator shot a man at the cotton gin in front of everybody, and nothing happened. And then the person who finally came forward as a witness was also murdered, and that case there's never even been a trial of the real found case, right? So that's no longer the world we live in. But what gets me about that is I mean, I'm always perplexed by this too, that you're describing growing up in a home that actually you're waxing nostalgic for the old days. A lot of what you were saying was if only we could go back to this time when there was a community and people cared for each other and looked after each other. And I'm also looking at a world in which a state legislator could shoot a guy dead, and with no consequence. How do we actually process both of those things?
Well, what you just said, as long as you were in this community, you were safe. But now if you were to go downtown and didn't get off the sidewalk for somebody, then there were consequences. And then our parents, in turn, ensured that as kids growing up, that we stayed in this community for our own safety. Am I making sense? Yeah, that's basically what happened. Because we knew, it's like when I was saying about looking at the pictures of Emmett Till and the graphic pictures that were shown, we knew what could happen to us if we left this community. So as a girl growing up here in Macomb, it wasn't often that I went downtown in Macomb. And if I did, it was with my parents.
Well, how much contact did you have with white people?
None.
There you go.
None.
What about your parents? Did they have any contact with white people?
Yes, they did. But as a child, I didn't.
It's funny, I read this book, Sweetness. Well, I'm from Columbia, Walter Baker, the Columbia native. And it describes, and all the people that they interviewed in this book are people that I know personally, most of them anyway. And Eddie Baker, Walter's brother, he talks about the exact same thing. He says that in the black community during that time, he says they really didn't have a total concept as children as to what they were missing. He said they knew things were different. They had separate schools. He said they knew that the white Columbia High School had things that they didn't have. They couldn't go play in the city park. They couldn't play on the football field. He said, but in that community, he said they had their own stores. He said it was self-contained, so they didn't really have a total concept of actually what all they were missing, by not being integrated. And then when they passed, of course, Brown versus Board of Education didn't kick in until many years later in 1970, when they first integrated. He said that it was like, it was culture shock. Now we got to actually, and before that time, they had actually passed a policy in Columbia that says, hey, you can go to school wherever you want. You can apply to any school you want to in the county. But of course, the black students and their parents didn't force them to go to the white school because they knew that was going to subject them to all types of, harassment. So they just didn't do it. You were safe. As long as you stay here where we are, in our self-contained community, you'll be all right. You'll be safe. And that's why he said the parents, he said when it got dark, parents made sure they knew where their children were. They were at home. You had to be at home. You didn't venture out after certain times of the night. You didn't go certain places because you knew if you got caught in the wrong place, you might be subjected to that type of thing. So you said the exact same thing that you were. You said a lot of being nostalgic about the old times. I mean, people knew things were bad. But they made the best of what they had inside their own community, and they rallied together. And in that sense, I think the black community was a whole lot better off.
Yeah, it was a whole lot different. Like now,
Totally different.
Where I live in a subdivision. I know all my neighbors, and all my neighbors are black. But then, do I visit them?
You don't really know.
No.
You know, basically I talked to my, my neighbor across the street when we were out at the mailbox getting our mail. And then the lady that lived next door to me sometimes when we were out working in our yard. But the community that I grew up in, I knew every single person and visited. And you knew these people intimately, and I still have a relationship with all those people that grew up with me, basically.
I was born in '65, and I can tell you from my own accounts, if I was around the corner playing, anybody on that street had permission to whoop my behind.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I made it back home, I got another one when I got home.
Yeah.
The whole community had raised
Right,
you.
yeah, we were raised by that building.
They had
Yeah.
permission to do whatever they needed to do.
Yeah,
And it's just not like that anymore.
right, that's what
There's a
it
big
is.
difference between city and rural, compliance, because my mom grew up in the city, and my dad grew up in the country. And they do have different stories now, but they were born in the 30s. But I don't know when it really changed into totally more self-contained communities, because my mom tells me that she was poor, they were poor white people. And where Pearl River Bridge is in Macomb, the Pearl River Bridge that goes into downtown.
Yeah.
She grew up in that area, and it was mostly blacks in that area. And she tells stories, her stories are different. So, but that was kind of before the violence. So I'll have to ask her more
Right,
questions.
and see where you're talking about, where State Street, go across that bridge. That was almost like the dividing line between the black community and the white community.
So my mom lived
See.
on the wrong side.
Well, she was poor,
That's
you
right.
know,
Well,
and
that's
so that's
how
where
she.
poor whites live.
When we
Yeah,
discuss
working class.
racism then,
Yeah, working
she
class
ties
whites
it-
live.
She ties it to more of an economic
Right.
line also.
Yeah, it was an economic line. And then north of there is where black community was, where Brooklyn was, on up north of where you're talking about. And it was more of an economic line, and it's almost the same way now, from that community to the other side of town. You know what I mean? But it was a working class group of people that lived over on the east side of
And even when they did that, there was still that segregation between, these are the poor whites, these are the.
Exactly.
Yeah, my mom
Yeah.
played Black Hills.
Right.
That was,
Because
her and her brothers and sisters were the only
You
whites
watch some
in
of
that
these
area.
old English or Scottish movies where the class system up there, if you're in the upper class, you don't deal with it. It's not color, it's just strictly black.
And then if you're talking about with the houses, some of the houses in that area, the next door neighbors were black. You see what I'm saying, where the line might
A
stop or
lot of them
whatever.
worked at, Hill.
Exactly.
My grandfather, was one of the foremen there, and they all, my mom said that they went to each other's houses, they helped each other. When my grandmother got sick, all of the black community came and there was 11 brothers and sisters, and they all took turns coming in and taking care of them, when her mother was sick.
Yeah, some of that stuff happened in that community, but you're right. See, that was where it was separated by class, from the east side to the west side. And then you have that, right over, where is it, around Baypine, over in that area that used to come. Where some,
I know where you're talking.
yeah, some houses were built, and that was for some people that worked in the railroad, was it Larry? And then the people that had certain positions in the railroad, when they started working at the railroad, lived in East Macomb. But if you had the higher positions, you lived on the other side of the railroad. So,
But just to throw in a couple of things real quick on this. One of the things to keep in mind is that when you're a historian, lots of things are changing at the same time. And we're just looking at one thing, and when we try to explain why things change, looking at only one thing, we sometimes miss that there are other factors that are going on too. So I'll give you a seemingly random thing. Air conditioning, right? People lived outdoors in Mississippi. They lived on their porches. And everybody knew what was going on in the neighborhood, and everybody knew every school child who went past, because it was 100 degrees if you were inside. And once every house has air conditioning, people are bottled up in there. So that's an example. Similarly, think what happens to the structure of commerce, right? Most people, even in the America I grew up in, you shopped the local shoe store, the local food store. you lived in a neighborhood. And neighborhoods get blown up that way with the large box stores, and now we routinely drive 15 minutes to some Walmart or whatever. You just look at the geography of Macomb, right? Which the interstate comes in, the side roads come in, all the commerce, all the hotels, all the restaurants move out to the interstate exchange, right? And so there's just ways in which communities being corroded for lots of other causes. So the very last thing I'd say about this, it's really important. I mean, this issue really fascinates me, the nostalgia for the bad old days, right? And I'm always trying to puzzle it out and trying to work with students about how we can think about it without romanticizing a past that we don't want to go back to, right? One of the things segregation did was it put everybody in the same boat. You were all subject, it didn't matter if your parents had gone to college, or this person was a physician, or somebody else was a railroad worker. You all had to live in the same neighborhood. You all had to send your kids to the same school, and you were all vulnerable to the same. None of you got to vote. You were all vulnerable to the same things. And so that created communities that had a kind of class structure unto themselves. And one of the things, I'm not saying integration was bad, would never say that. But one of the things that happened as the Jim Crow regime is broken, and as schools like the one I teach at start accepting more than 2 black students a year, now we accept hundreds. Some of those people who have been compelled to live in that black community get out. And the people who don't get out are often the people with the least resources. So you end up creating, black neighborhoods where a lot of the most economically successful, most intact people in that community no longer live there. And so there's lots of other things that are happening that are actually corroding that.
This is corroded the whole community that I actually grew up in. It doesn't actually exist. Because everybody that lived there, older people have died out, and then all the kids have gone someplace else.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to say. Whenever the story broke in the newspaper last year about the Martin Luther King Memorial in D.C. and who designed it, and it talked about him growing up over there in Berlin, and his story about growing up in Berlin was almost the same story as yours. It's as if y'all got together and compared notes, and you didn't.
No,
But he had that same story.
Yeah, but
So,
he lived in that same community. He lived next door to the church.
I read that article in my classroom, and in my local culture class, and one of my students, as I was reading, I could see him get more and more troubled on his face. And when I finished, he was a real outspoken kid. He was like, "That is not the neighborhood that I live in. He lives right there where you live and where that the story was about." He said, you can't, the stuff he talks about cannot be done over there. There aren't a lot of men, because it talked about the male influence, the father figures, all that. It was really a wake-up call for that kid. And that there ever could have been a community like the community that you described and that he described, where he lives now, which he feels like is like a ghetto, which is really remarkable in just a few years. We can go from that idyllic community kind of place to boarded up buildings and scary stuff.
Anybody got a final question for our panelists? Well, then please join me in thanking them. This was terrific.